that stuff was mastered on that digital.
Right.
There is no analog
Right.
master to take. So you could never even come up with an analog original of it unless you converted the digital to analog and then put it on vinyl.
Right. I mean, it
You
would
know?
only work if like everything you listen to is like 50 years old.
You know, last week I caught this thing going around the internet now that something about a class action lawsuit against MoFi because something that they were using as a source was being put to vinyl, which is what they're doing. They're remastering vinyl, old vinyl to new, you know, and something to the effect that, you know, they were using digital files or something to, the original file they're putting to album was digital. And I'm thinking, so? You know, I'm thinking, well, you're putting it to vinyl, right? It's like that's a whole different beast right there, right? It's a whole different animal. Once you go to vinyl, you're changing the format to, I mean, something that requires a record player to play, which is a highly tunable device. You know what I mean? I mean, record players themselves are just like all over the place in terms of how they play an album, any one album, right? You can take one album and put it on 100 record players, and they're all going to sound different. So the question is, why does it matter so much? I'm thinking about this. Why does it matter so much what the original format was when you're putting it to vinyl anyway? You know,
It's a tricky one.
Yeah.
And I could kind of see both sides on this. But I guess from the consumer perspective, you're buying the record and you're playing back on a little thing that's mechanically moving up and down from the bumps on this record. Totally different conceptually from how digital works. So it does raise the question, does it matter?
And even tape too. I mean, tape's got no
Well,
bumps.
any format change.
Yeah,
right?
any
sure.
format. Yeah, you're
When
right.
you change the format,
it's going to a mechanical
that's substantially.
playback.
It's not like it's a minor difference. It's not like a digital format difference, DSD to PCM or something like that. This is a dramatic difference in how it's played back. So it is actually, I guess, a reasonable enough question to the consumer. Does it matter? Should it matter?
Yeah.
What the differences are?
Well, I mean, the more important thing is how well was it the digital file mastered and sounds to begin with, right?
Right.
That's the more important part, right?
Yeah. Well, I know like in the 80s too, when they started doing, when the CD came out, they started recording the 44.1 or 9. I think the pros were running 88, probably double that, 82. I don't know, or 96K, maybe 96K was the norm. I don't remember, but early digital kind of sounded like shit. But the point is that stuff was mastered on that digital. There is no analog master to take. So you could never even come up with an analog original of it unless you converted the digital to analog and then put it on vinyl.
Right. I mean, it would only work if like everything you listen to is like 50 years old, you know, and it's originally recorded.
Yeah, like stuff from the 60s and 70s with a properly stored master tape. You know, but yeah. And people have done that. I mean, you see that a lot of stuff, you know, where they get the original master tapes, which is kind of sought after when you're doing this kind of remastering stuff. But I think most of the remasters out there, most are more on CD.
Yeah.
You know, that's vinyl didn't get really popular until recently again.
Yeah.
You know, but you think about it, most of the remasters that we've seen in our life, in your lifetime at least, have been on CD.
Yes.
And
some digital too.
Yeah. Well, and they tend to sound worse than the originals, obviously, for all kinds of reasons that unbeknownst to us, because we didn't do the remastering.
What's the thing? You start looking at albums, and just not even like coming from digital, just albums that have came out over the years, and they all sound different. Oh, like everybody's looking for this 1977 pressing, right?
Yeah.
Even though they were all analog, right?
Yeah, like Pink Floyd comes to mind.
Right.
How many remasters of Pink Floyd have been put out there, right? And it's pretty obvious. I mean, it's to sell more records. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? You do another remaster, and Pink Floyd fans have to buy it. You got to have it, right? You can't not have it.
But that raises the question: if what you had when it was originally recorded was analog, well, obviously that's going to be what you start with. But what if it was digital? And for the last considerable period of time, pretty much everything recorded is going to originate on digital, one format or another.
You're talking nearly 40 years.
Yeah, so
40 years. So what? You don't use it?
What do you do? Do you re-record it?
You never put that to vinyl in a good way, or or a different way, or a better way, or whatever. I mean, yeah. So I mean, you're seeing that now though a lot. You're seeing older albums being repressed.
Right.
You know, AC/DC comes to mind. I've got the original albums from the 80s, or I think it was early 80s, but now you can get them back in black, but it's been pressed recently.
Right.
And I actually didn't buy one. I can't
Yeah,
tell
right.
you if it sounds better or
That-
worse.
Yeah, that's the thing. It is. I am
You know?
kind of interested in that
Yeah.
though, to see, because if you have the original, you know, you can compare it.
Experience has shown that it's probably going to be worse
Right.
because I'm thinking, you know, that probably the same amount of care isn't being put into a reissue or whatever
Mhm.
they call it, you know, versus the original one. But I don't know. I can't say either
That's
way.
an interesting one because it seems practical that you should be able to make a re-release of something like that today better than it was.
If
Right?
you
That
wanted to,
if you
would.
really
Yeah.
cared, you would think it would be very possible. However, it almost never happens.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's part of the equation. I wonder if they sort of misled people into thinking that what they were doing was more significant than what they were, that they were effectively re-recording this
Well, that
in
brings,
an analog
that brings
fashion.
up another point: is that what we're talking about, ultimately we're talking about, is subjective.
Mhm.
Right.
Like, you know, it's in the eyes of the beholder. Now, if you weren't my age and you didn't have the original AC/DC album,
Right.
and you never used it before back when it came out, like I did, on a turntable and speakers of that vintage and that day, which basically is kind of what everyone used then, right, so to speak, without, unless you're like crazy baller, which even high end. I mean, there was high end audio, but not to what the level is today. My point is, if you're playing that album on a close and play record player,
Right.
does it even matter at that
Well-
point? You know, I mean, so now you got to think about, okay, so now what are you playing it on? Well, that's a huge variable. You know, they got USB turntables for a few $100 nowadays, and you know, I mean, so,
I would imagine the majority of people are playing albums like that on $50 to $100 turntables.
yeah,
A lot of
oh,
times with like built-in speakers or things like that, and they're
Oh, yeah.
not stellar.
yeah,
Yeah, you were just in a hotel that they had a turntable in the room. Huh?
oh yeah.
I'd never seen that before.
Blew my mind.
Yeah.
And not only that, they had albums that I kind
Yeah.
of thought it was cool. They had
Well, nobody's like bringing albums with them to their
Yeah.
hotel, so I guess they have to have something there. But yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we were in Cape Cod, and I go walk into the room, and there's a turntable there with built-in speakers, which is a
Right.
shitty sounding turntable. It did maybe, I don't know, I'd say 300 to 400 hertz. It did well.
Oh,
It was like the old phone receivers, you know.
Right,
It did
right.
voice real well, but everything else sucked out of it.
Right.
But you know, hey, it played.
right.
You know, and it wasn't something they were worried about if someone ruined it. The kid took the frickin' needle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does seem kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
just-
in a room. It's in a hotel room. You know, and it had a clear cover. But yeah, there was like 4 albums sitting there. You know, Harry Belafonte. Who puts Harry Belafonte in a room? You know, and I had to play. I thought it was the coolest thing. But you know, that being said, it was horrible playback. I'm like, Jesus, I could. I
Well, it's just
almost
little
wanna-
speakers built in.
Well, yeah, right in the face of it, like facing up to the ceiling, you know. And I'm like, I wish I had some speakers here, you know. But the thing is, like you said, there's probably most people that's what they're playing it on is something like that. So, in the end, I think when you talk about the masses, who are probably the ones buying most of these albums, right? It wouldn't matter anyway. It wouldn't matter what the source was.
Right.
It wouldn't matter that it's vinyl or whatever. It wouldn't
It's
matter.
more of a novelty. Right?
Yeah, right.
But I mean, because that's the thing. The people that are, let's say, buying Back in Black now, new, they don't have the original. Probably,
Right.
they've never heard the original on
Yeah.
vinyl. So
Yeah, and they probably don't have a turntable that would do it justice anyway.
probably
And
not.
that's the key point, right? Kind of. I mean, you're not playing it back on like some of the audio files. I mean, you could spend $100,000 on a system to do,
Easy.
you know.
You know.
And by all means, they're extracting everything out of the groove on the record. They can hear every friggin'. It sounds. I've heard really, really good vinyl systems, you know, in the past with shows, and guys like, you know, guys make these air-bearing turntables. I mean, you're talking about a separate box just to produce compressed air to raise the turntable so it floats on air like a, you know, the old hockey game, the air hockey games.
Oh, they have like vacuum platters and everything.
Yeah, actually air would they to put tiny little holes through the bottom, and you turn the compressor on and it pushes just tiny amounts of air through these little holes, just enough to raise the platter. Now the platter is sitting over air, and it's just a tiny point pin in the middle holding the damn thing from falling off. So there's almost no friction, and once you get that air bearing spinning, it'll go for days. Like it does. There's nothing to slow
Well, it's
it
like
down.
really heavy.
You know, and then they belt drive it. But yeah, but the point is, I mean, these mechanical things that these guys come up with turntables are just unbelievable. Some of them, you see some of the German-made turntables. But the point is, yeah, you're running something like that. Now all of a sudden, all of this matters. Now, you're probably not buying reissues. You're looking for crazy good mint original pressings.
Yeah, and then that gets expensive.
Yeah.
You pretty much go by price. It's like, which one's the most sought after? Well, it's the one that's $500 because everybody
right.
wants it.
It's true. They've gone up a lot. in the last
It's
year.
expensive, yeah.
There's not too many of them.
Yeah.
Inflation hit the used market on albums. Yeah, and they're
Mhm.
getting scarcer because people are buying them up. The younger generation's buying it
I
up.
don't know.
Does it matter if the source file is digital or tape or even an original album being played back and pressed, the new album, which is a lot of, there are actually, I don't know if people realize this, but there are mediators in between this. There are companies that take the original format and they have excellent gear, top shelf. We're talking, these tape, like if you had the original was tape, I don't know what the new price is on these tape decks, but you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah.
To have a studio grade, reel to reel. It's expensive toys. Those things ain't just laying around somewhere.
Well, it's a pretty limited market at this point, you know.
And same with digital. If you're going to record the high-res PCM or DSD, you're going to have some expensive toys in the rack of gear there. It's not going to be like these small studios, where you see they got old mixers from the 70s and they're running tubes. This is some serious shit. You're talking $20, $30, $40, $50,000 ADs, DAs, Anyway, we know like Bruce at Puget Studios, he does this stuff. And he's got to have $1 million worth of crap. He's got easy. Who knows what he's got now? But I'm just saying, but he's always upgrading it. He's keeping up. But the point is he's probably got 4 or 5 reel-to-reels.
Yeah.
Just lined up. And he'll take the original master tape and put it to, I guess he's running DSD 256 now. And that's where it's going. That's the digital file that the studios are now using from the original master tape that was properly stored from the 60s and 70s. They're going to DSD 256. And I'll be damned if you could hear a difference between DSD 256 and any other form. It's like, that's a high resolution.
Well, it was
recording.
specifically made for that, though. DSD was designed to be like archival quality.
Yeah. At DSD 64 rate,
Yeah.
that was the original rate. This is, I don't know if I'm assuming it scales linearly, but I'm not sure. But 256
Yeah, it's just
is
a data rate.
yeah, it's a way. You're talking, that's a high data rate,
But it raises the question, does the process matter? And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but it kind of sort of is up to the consumer, I guess, in this front, because it's easy for a enthusiast to fall into the trap of worrying about the process. And in fact, that happens more often than not. You worry about what hardware you're using. You like a particular piece of gear because of some design methodology or the way it looks or the way it functions, not necessarily the actual end result. And more often than not, standard consumers, what they care about is the end result. They care about when they fill their car up with gas, it drives for this distance. They don't care about the gas, right? And it's like that in a lot of regards. So does it matter to a consumer that it may have been mastered in a different format than it was actually pressed on the vinyl? Does it matter that it was a digital format? Does it matter at all what format they used in the intermediary steps?
I don't think they'd be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, but it's beyond being able to tell the difference. Does it matter even if you
Yeah.
can't tell the difference?
Well, I guess if you had an audio file set up like we were talking about,
Yeah.
where you spend all this money on a turntable, and that's what you're doing, is
Right.
extracting everything out the groove. Those guys could probably tell the difference, but between what and what, I'm not sure. Like the difference between what, you don't even know.
Well, you don't know if it's better
Yeah.
or worse. You can know it's different.
Yeah.
I would believe that in most cases.
Unless you have the original pressing, which was vinyl, but then you don't have the original tape, so you don't even know how that was done.
Well, it also could be
And
that
put the vinyl.
you prefer the original because you've been listening to the original for 60 years, right?
Well, that- yeah.
You don't like how it's changed.
Oh, that's
right?
true.
That
Yeah.
could be
Well,
it might not even be sound.
Well,
right?
A lot of guys, the high end of things, they've tuned their system around that sound. You think about it, they've chosen their cartridges
Yeah.
to play that type of record or that
Right.
vintage, the speakers, everything. Everything's been, the phono stage, the phono amplification, it's all been tuned around what they like to listen to. And just the cartridges alone on these turntables vary wildly. And you could get, $50 cartridges, and you can get $50,000 cartridges.
But that ensures an intrinsic bias because now you're setting up for what it used to be. And maybe what it is now could be better for a more modern system
True.
or a more modern listener. And it could be you don't like it because it's different and not because it's worse.
That's true.
And that's common enough. but how do you really tell, right? That's a very difficult thing to gauge.
Well, yeah, because now we're at the subjective. It's like telling somebody, well, that Five Guys hamburgers are shit. Well, I don't know. I like Five Guys
maybe
hamburgers.
not, right?
I think their fries are great.
Actually, I have heard a guy one time say he hates Five Guys fries.
Oh, really?
I'm like, oh my god.
Well,
But
what does he like?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah. So to see there's a subjective part of it that's really, really more of an issue than anything. And that's the bottom line, is that you either buy these new albums or you don't. Like I prefer to go and find as minty as possible of the original albums. That's what I prefer to do. Because that's when it was made. That's when it was made. Nobody touched it since then.
Yeah, they're usually dirty though. That's the problem.
Yeah,
Even the cleanest examples, they've been sitting in a.
You got to get that
sleeve for so long.
ultrasonic cleaner for it.
Because that's the nice thing. I played a brand new album the other day, and it's like, it's like almost like CD. So quiet.
Well, even if you talk to like the old school guys about new vinyl, they even like to clean that because they said like there's oils that get in
release
there
agent.
from the pressing that aren't totally removed, and you can actually even a new album can sound better if it's properly cleaned. But anyway, back on topic. So yeah, I'm at a loss here because I understand that because you're changing formats to analog. I can't, like in my head I'm thinking it's like I remember when we heard DSD put to tape. So the original file was DSD, probably 128, which was taken off a master tape. It was a copy of a master. This is from working with studios. We're going back years ago. Mm-hmm. They had the original analog tape from, let's say, from 1970. Okay, analog tape, jazz. Let's say it was jazz on this tape. It was properly converted to DSD 128 through a very, very nice high-end pro reel-to-reel. We're talking, they're big.
Yeah,
they stand on their own stand. They have meters and knobs, and it's a pro unit, right? Anyway, take that clean as can off the tape to DSD 128, which is considered an archival storage that Sony created years ago, like you said, right? So now you got this in digital. Now you can do anything you want with it, right? You can go anywhere. It could travel. You could send it as a file. The tape can be put back in storage because the tape can't travel. The tape's out of they keep it under temperature and humidity control. Otherwise, it would be falling apart. The tape particles fall off, the tape's shot. Mm-hmm. So these tapes come out of the cave just long enough to put the digital so that now they can be utilized. That's how the system works nowadays. That's how it's been working for years. And that's why we're hearing now, when you go to and you hear some of these, whatever it is, live concerts or stuff that went on years ago, right? The reason that we're able to hear it today through the likes of the streaming service and stuff is because at some point someone paid to take the analog, whether it was film or vinyl or tape, or even vinyls used, and put it to digital, so that now you got a high-res format. Now you could dumb that down and do whatever you want with it. And to me, taking that, nowadays they're running DSD 256 is what I hear. So, they're taking whatever the original analog is, put it to DSD 256, which is just like, if you played both of them back side by side, the DSD file on a really high-end DAC, D to A conversion, right, versus the vinyl, the original tape, you can't tell the difference on the same system.
Well, that should be the case.
That digital copy is freaking identical to the damn original. In fact, it's probably better with the original because now it can travel.
Well, that's the thing. In analog, all bets are off. Anything could affect it. But once it's digital, set in stone now.
How many playbacks can you get before you can start noticing audible degradation on anything, a record, a tape?
Well, yeah.
Because it's not infinite.
Every play is aware.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's an issue.
Yeah.
Right.
And the analog can't
big
travel.
Big advantages with
the
digital
tapes
there.
Can't travel. Yeah.
Plus, it's a lot easier to play back a file than needing a, reel to reel. Everybody needing it. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like nobody would have that, and that's kind of the same deal when I see it converted to album. They're taking whatever the original is, and let's say some special place that does this, like I said, some of these studios, that's all they do is they take the original tapes. They're very careful with it. They know how to set it up properly on the reel-to-reel so that it sounds its best, taken off the tape. They listen to it. They subjectively understand the variables, changing the head azimuth or whatever. Like reel-to-reels, I mean, if the tape was recorded on one deck 50 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, now you're playing back on another deck, you got to adjust the deck's head to match whatever their head adjust was made back then. So anyway, there's a lot of care that goes into converting. It's not just like people. I don't think people understand the process, right?
Right.
We could do a whole other video on
Yeah.
that. But there's a process.
But I think people don't really care about the process because of them it doesn't matter. And so then, in that regard, does it matter at all what format's used in the intermediary step? Does it really make a difference to people?
Well, that's the thing, that's what I can't figure out. That's where when I hear this, I'm like, so let me get this straight. There's a problem putting this to vinyl because the source was digital? I'm thinking, well, if it's a high-res digital file, so what? That's way better than what you're putting it to if you ask me. You're putting it to a piece of vinyl that's just stamped out.
Yeah, but you're paying attention to the result. You want a better result.
Right.
What if you don't care about the result? What if you care about the process?
True. Yeah.
Right.
Well, you don't
That's a
care at all.
question.
You just throw it on a close and play. And
Well, I mean,
I don't know if anyone
Yeah.
knows what a close and play is, but
No.
garbage.
they used to have turntables that look folded up into a suitcase
still
shape when I
make
was a
'em.
kid. Do they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they were cool. Until one time I made a mistake and I closed it while there was an album in it. I couldn't open it without breaking the album. That was a bad idea. Yeah. I don't know how that happened. Probably because I was a kid. Yeah. The album hung over the edge of the close and play.
Yeah.
We closed it and kind of really like flexed and jammed it into the case. So you're getting it out and it was like, I was like bending.
That's
Anyway-
interesting.
Anyway, I never closed a close and play with a 33 on it.
That does bring up. There had to be a lot of damaged turntables and back in the day with kids.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. Well, that's why they gave us kids these close and plays.
Right.
But I mean, even like listening to that thing in the hotel room that we were talking about earlier, it pretty much sounded like to me like a close and play. It was the same damn sound. It was just
Right.
very basic. Might as well have one mono speaker in there because that's about what it sounded like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But in the end, I don't know. People are going to figure this out for themselves. But I thought it was an interesting topic to talk about.
Talked about it for seems like a long time, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, maybe it matters to you, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Let us know in your comments. Please subscribe to us. We're still shooting for 20,000 by the end of the year.
Oh, yeah.
And September 1st is right now. Second, third. It's not the beginning of summer, so we got much time.
Mm-hmm. You got to get on it.
Yeah. Thumbs us up at least. Hit the like. Thank you, everybody. Take care.